Riser, and welcome back to our next session as we look at this battle of pornography. And last time I talked about the cycle, and so of pornography, which was the rejection, the temptation, the action, and the reaction. And so what I wanted to do today was take a little bit more time and look at those first two, the rejection and the temptation, and get into a little bit more detail, and really hoping and looking for that opportunity to really delve into this and delve into more steps with those that are really battling this as we work through this battle together, as we look at doing some kind of a support group to help walk through this battle. Because again, what's important is in any battle, the battle is never alone. It does take an army. It does take a group of us to fight the enemy, because the enemy is coming at us as a group also. So we need to be standing strong together, covering each other's back, covering them in prayer. And so that becomes very important. And really, as I think about it now, this really feeds into that whole beginning of the cycle with that rejection. As I stated before, rejection seems to be that common root that we see a lot of people that are battling this addiction and even other addictions. It seems to be that popular theme. And so what is rejection? And rejection, really, in that spirit of rejection, what comes in, it's really, it gets us believing that we're not good enough, that we're not even, in many cases, good enough for God's love. And really what that even boils down to is that what Jesus did on the cross was good for others, but not for me. It wasn't enough, or at least I'm not able to embrace what he did in that, because there is something wrong with me. That God made some kind of mistake, or that I've been singled out. And see, that's what that spirit of rejection does, is it gets in there, and it just twists that perspective and takes everything to someone can be having a bad day. Someone themselves could be battling with something completely different, but they're having a bad day. They don't talk to you, or they're off in another area dealing with other things, and you feel ignored, and they're just trying to avoid conflict with anybody because they've had it, but that spirit is saying, they're rejecting me. And we keep looking through that lens of being rejected. And what happens then is it really begins to isolate us. It pulls us back, because there's when we start getting into that spirit of rejection, there are some common themes and some common things that we see actually happen. And that first one is that pulling back, that isolating. And what happens is, as we isolate, what we're doing is in many ways we're rejecting others, or we're deciding we're going to reject others before they can reject us. And in the end, because we're pulling back, people do end up rejecting us, and now we're further isolated. And the problem with that is that we were made to have fellowship. We weren't made to be alone. That's why Eve was even created, because God saw that man was alone, and he needed companionship. He needed equal or like companionship. And in everything else in his creation, there was nothing like that. We're intended to have relationship. And so when we're not having that relationship, when we're feeling like we're rejected, and then we're pushing other people away to avoid that rejection, how can we not help but get into that hopelessness? Because it's never going to end. So the one thing that we do see in that again is with that spirit of rejection is we're isolating ourselves, or we're going to isolate ourselves so we don't get rejected. And you can see the issue that it has there. Another problem that it causes is that again, it starts to get us to look through the eyes of our flesh and not through the eyes of the Spirit. You know, Romans 8, 5, and 6 even tells us that for those who live according to the flesh set their minds on the things of the flesh, but those who live according to the Spirit, the things of the Spirit. For to be carnally minded is death, but to be spiritually minded is life and peace. You see, we're not going to have rest. We're not going to have peace. We're not going to have that fulfillment because we're looking through the eyes of the flesh. We're not relying on the Spirit. We're not believing what God has done for us, what Jesus has done for us, what the Holy Spirit is there to lead us into truth. We're resting on that. We're looking through the eyes of the flesh. And when we begin to look in the eyes of the flesh, now we're looking for solutions of our own. We're looking for solutions out of our own flesh. And so then we're not able to hear the Spirit and guide us. That shuts it down because, again, we're in the flesh. We're looking for our own identity. If God hasn't accepted us, if others aren't accepting us, then we're going to find a way. We're going to find that happiness, but we're doing it in the flesh. And now, because that's enmity, because we're looking to the carnal, that's death, that's destruction. It is in God's Spirit. It's in that Spirit that we find peace, that we find our identity, that we really begin to know who we are. Okay? And when we're again looking for that identity of our own, really what it is doing is it's opening the door to pride now, because we're putting it upon ourselves to find our identity, to find our purpose, to find out who we are. It also opens that door to envy and jealousy, because we're looking for things by comparison to others, and we're trying to fulfill our purpose, our identity, based on what we see in others. Okay? And if we weren't designed for that, we're not going to have that peace. We're not going to have that happiness. We're not going to have that contentment. We're not going to be resting in who we are. And I said, I speak a lot, or I use this analogy a lot, just in that a flathead screwdriver is not going to be the most successful at sinking or screwing in a Phillips head screw. Okay, can it be done? Yeah, but it's going to be a lot of frustration and really not a lot of satisfaction. We're not going to have that satisfaction. We're not going to have that connection until we're connecting with the things that He's placed within us. So that's where that becomes important. Okay, is again, we need to be relying on Him. We need to be seeking out who He says we are. Okay. And the thing is, we're not junk. We're not a mistake. He does love us. He does want us to be with Him. He wants to lead us and guide us. And it's when He's leading and guiding us that we're in the most freedom. Another thing, when we're looking through the eyes of the flesh and not in the eyes of the Spirit, our focus also then tends to now go onto our failures. Okay? And that just further drives us down further into that rejection, and because we're focused on the failures, we're focused on the things that we don't have instead of the things that God has for us. And again, that brings the confusion, that brings the hurt, that brings the hopelessness, because we're wondering why. what's wrong with me, when we need to be focused on the person who does know who we are, because he's the one that created us and he's the one that can lead us and guide us into that truth. Which comes back to, like I said before, you're not able to hear God when you're in the flesh, and if we're not able to hear him, we're not able to find that truth. We're not able to be in that freedom because we're not operating in the giftings. We're not operating in the person that we were created to be. Due to the length of this teaching, we have broken this training into 3 video sessions. This concludes our first session on understanding rejection.